Woodworking for Mere Mortals is sponsored by
Microjig, maker of the gripper. Work safer, work smarter.
This week's project is another great design inspired by Carmen Salomon. Many of you will remember Carmen, whose marshmallow crossbow shooter became one of the most popular projects of last year. Carmen's pretty much been in full production mode lately, making lots of these really cool tankards. I used his technique for making these, only I simplified them by eliminating the handle and making them larger for use as flower pots. I've got a thick epoxy finish on the inside of these to make them waterproof. I'm resawing and planing all these boards down to 1/4 inch thick. I'm gonna rip all of these strips with a 12-degree bevel. I'll start by making one bevel on the edge of each of these strips. Now with my fence moved over, I can cut a series of 1-inch wide strips. And with my blade straightened out, again, I can use my crosscut sled to cut all of these down to 5-inch long pieces. I've clamped a straight piece of plywood to my workbench to help me line these all up. I'm gonna lay out a couple of pieces of masking tape, sticky side up, and I'll tape the ends down. And I'll start lining these up by butting them up against the plywood. I figured out that at the size and the bevels I made mine, it takes 16 strips. Now I can just squeeze some glue in between each of these slats. Now it's just a matter of rolling this up very carefully. Well, that's interesting. For some reason, this one only takes 14. Maybe the slats are thicker than the one I'd made before. So that's obviously a different size than my test version. This one I clamped together just using rubber bands. I'm gonna try something different on this one though. I've got some of these hose clamps. I'm going to edge join the two of these 1/4 inch panels to make the bottom. These two boards will help keep it flat. I'm not really sure why this test one I made used 16 slats and these use 14. I'm sure there's a mathematical way to figure it all out, but I think if you just cut extra pieces, you'll be fine. And that gets it mostly round. It's very smooth though. Before I put the bottom on, I want to round over the top. And this is going to be a lot easier to do before I put the bottom on so I can see where I'm routing. This is a 1/4 inch round over bit. I'm cutting this out oversized so I'll have room to sand it flush. I'll use a flush trim bit in my router to even up the base with the rest of the pot. I'll ease over these bases with that same 1/4 inch round over bit I used on the tops. To waterproof the insides of these, I'm going to use this pour-on epoxy finish. And it says here that 1 thick coat of this equals 50 coats of varnish. I guess somebody had to measure that, don't you think? 50 coats of varnish? I'd be happy with 40, really. The critical part of this, so that it'll work, is to make sure that you pour out equal parts of the hardener and the resin. I've got a whole bunch of these plastic cups that have lines on them, so I can use that to measure. And I've got 2 disposable knives that I'll use to mix these together. And this gets stirred for a full 2 minutes. Then after 2 minutes of mixing that, you gotta pour it into a clean cup and stir for another minute. Then pour it in. I've got a disposable brush that I'll use to spread it around on the inside. And I can let that sit. Well, that worked out pretty well. I let this dry overnight and it's formed a really hard, thick, almost a plastic surface. I'm going to finish the outside with some spray lacquer. Well, I think this turns out to be a unique gift project. It's also the kind of project that lends itself to a lot of tinkering with. Spend some time experimenting with the width and the thickness of these slats, as well as the bevel, and see what you come up with. And I'd like to thank you all for joining me this week on Woodworking for Mere Mortals. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, please do so now. I have new woodworking videos every Friday. And don't forget, if you've completed a project that you'd like to show off, please feel free to post it on the Woodworking for Mere Mortals Facebook page so everyone can see it. And once again, I'd like to thank Carmen for helping me out with this project and for his endless source of great ideas. I have a feeling this isn't the last project we'll be seeing from Carmen. Thanks everybody, I'll see you next Friday.